Let me remind all of ourselves to cultivate the altruistic motivation, seeking complete enlightenment for the sake of liberating infinite, kind, mother sentient beings. With that kind of altruistic motivation, which we call bodhicitta motivation, that we should all participate in this teaching. If we take a moment to consider purpose of our life, maybe we can think it in terms of two types of purpose. One is fulfilling purpose of this lifetime, and other is fulfilling purpose of future lives. In other words, we can think it this way, that we need to take care of this life as well as we need to take care of our future lives. In terms of taking care of this life, we need to succeed in what we do in this life, such as we have a job that we need to fulfill. And so we need to succeed at work or in our jobs. We need to succeed in our education, especially the young people who are growing up. They need to be educated well so that they will have a better life, here and now.
Zambu, ane kuno zambu kita, kuno te shuna chanju je sembi je sembi ne ngade shuna hera wa res go res.
Whether we are thinking of taking care of ourselves really well here and now or in this life, or whether we would like to take care of our future lives or work for the betterment of our future lives, in either case, I think proper motivation plays a very central role. Now, whether we go and get a good education, proper motivation, is important here, or whether we go to work to get things done, proper motivation plays an important role, I believe. Of course, when we think in terms of fulfilling purpose of future lives, that we could only do through spiritual cultivation or practice of Dharma. And of course here, pure motivation, proper motivation plays definitely a central or definitive role in this case. Of course, the best kind of motivation that we could have and that we should try to cultivate is the altruistic mind of enlightenment, or translated as awakening mind or enlightened mind, or any other translations that are there. But in Sanskrit it is called bodhicitta motivation. Bodhi meaning enlightenment, chitta meaning mind. So we call in Tibetan changchujisem, which is exactly the same thing. So if you could cultivate altruistic mind of enlightenment, that would be the best and the highest and the level pure motivation that we could generate in order to pursue spirituality, in order to take care of a thing in both this and future lives.
ane senje yen pen thawa ta lung yu da lung ba tin da chama lo pe da pen to ya bo yen chi che de ane ngi fa zhong de ya bo xie yin sam ba ji dang du xie yin na ane so so lo ju xie ba de da ga se da de gu ya ma zhe zhe su ji che ba jin sem che ba jin sim ba yin san ni so so zhong de da da ni ya bo yin ge de.
Let me explain a little bit more about the centrality of proper motivation plays in getting education. This is more kind of directed towards a younger audience who are in schools at different levels, maybe in high school or college or university or whatever you may. Now, if you really develop the motivation that I go to school, I'm really going to, stay focused and get a good education, not just for my own sake only, but really for the sake of benefiting, many people and many beings. And of course here, when we think in terms of many, and if possible, you can think in terms of everybody, or at least we could think in terms of, larger society per se, that I'm here getting good education, not just because then I'll get, a good life afterwards for myself, but more like I can bring good contribution. I can benefit society at large, my country at large, any other people at large in my society. Then I think really getting your education becomes much more meaningful. And also because of that motivation, I think that you're more likely to succeed in what in your education and in bringing benefits to others. So here, how the pure motivation or the proper motivation, it really, is a driving mechanism behind all the efforts you make in having a good education, so that you're not just going to be selfishly, okay, I have good education and then I get good to make. Geshe didn't say that, but that could be the point. A lot of money and then rich and famous. But I'm really going to be a very contributing member of the society.
So that is that things ane da lega she de she jin ba da na ye ji ane so so ne pe nan se ne ane pu bu ji ne de yong kin na 다 전주 내가 신경서 다 개발서 내가 시간 로도 있잖니 네 컴퍼니 내가 제규 삼부 맞아버시 컴퍼니 내가 제규 어디 이나 제규야 좀 세카르잖아 네 내가 시에니 디 토네 다 메이엔에 펜토이야다 디 토네 아니 소소에네 다 이긴 파이겐이랑 그 아니 부주다 전주리 기 펜토이야다 데레 자쳐 다 생이겐에 펜토이야 치에도 아니 내가 지금 인스 내가 지금 로긴 삼부시 동시 제가 내가 군노드리다 내가 지갈이야 다스 이해라니 내가 마시도 요지 땅 지타도 렌선도 좀 매버시 아니 사바상부지 캐시네 샤비나 그노야고 땅 내가 시비가는 소장 그래서 내가 시야 되니 배 장부지 미견의 편도시야 성도 땅 샤비나 일단 기다려만 그랬어.
And in the case of people who need to go to work, maybe you have your own families to take care of. And as you have heard Geshe said that maybe you're working for some company or some organization, whatever the case may be, just don't go there with the mindset that, okay, I'm working at this company and, so I just need to work, get by or whatever. I mean, that really, so to speak, doesn't cut it, if you will. You want to think more in terms of a larger kind of a framework of mind, which is that, okay, I go to work because I need to work, but at the same time so that I will be able to take better care of my families, okay? And so that my families, maybe as they grow up, they will be able to contribute to the society. Or that when I go to work, at least, I always try to maintain positive attitudes. I don't go there with some kind of a, cheating mind. Okay, how can I best cheat and, get by, or, go there and hurt someone's feelings or, but go there with really positive, attitude that if there's any way I could help anybody at work, I would be happy to do that. Or at least I'm going to have a positive mindset and relationship with people at work. Okay. So in that way, I'm also influencing and benefiting many others. And of course, maybe then through your own work, you may not realize that you are able to, with a good motivation, bring benefit to many other people in the society. So it's not just, 7-Eleven work there. It's not just working for a company called XYZ. But you are really, the way you think about your work is such that you are able to generate a lot of positive energy and make contributions in your own ways to the society, to your family, and to your community. The point I'm trying to make here, underneath all these explanations about motivation and all this kind of stuff, is that, if we really cultivate proper motivation, the things which we do, which are considered ordinary activities and ordinary works, which seems like, very ordinary, but these could, have a spiritual meaning and significance. Because motivation is very central. It undergirds, if a pure motivation, beneficial motivation, it underpins our ordinary, what seems to be work, school, and this and that, but they could have a really spiritual significance. Of course, in order to take ourselves in our future lives, there is no other alternative or option. There is no plan B. There's just only, plan A, and that is really to cultivate dharma or spirituality.
동해 뭐 해비나 된 중사가 자와티 닥게네 대 자와티 켄나 아니 답에 공부해야 돼 내가도 동해가 자와 동해 중사가 자와티 되고 손자 동해도 뭐 해나 대 자야겠다 아니 상황인 거래. In order to if you will motivate ourselves really sincerely to
pursue spirituality or Dharma, I think we do need to understand and reflect on problems and sufferings. Okay? And so only then we will really realize the true significance and the meaning of cultivating spirituality. And when we look at the first teaching Shakyamuni Buddha gave, which is called the teaching on the Four Noble Truths, Arya Satyas, or the Transcendental Truths as they were called, the first thing Buddha spoke about was the true suffering, or the truth of the suffering. It's almost like he's laying out the facts. Just look for yourself, all these problems, all these sufferings in samsara. Got to understand these things. So once we really understand deeply problems and sufferings that we face in our life, that others face in their life, when we are in samsara or cyclic existence, obviously nobody wants to be in this kind of a state of suffering. We want to get out. See, so once we really understand, truly feel that the situation we find ourselves in is not a happy situation. Okay, this is better, much better to be out of it rather than to be in it. Okay, so once we feel that, then we say, what is bringing all the suffering? I don't like it, nobody likes it, but yet we are running into these sufferings. So we get interested to find out the causes of suffering, and this is where then Buddha talked about the true causes of suffering, or the truth of the cause of suffering. He said, okay, these are the real culprits here which make your life miserable. Okay, and then once we know what are the roots of the suffering, the true cause of suffering, of course we get interested, is there a really way to uproot those things? And if there are those really methods or the antidotes, whatever you want to call them, we would definitely like to use them, take benefit from them. And then once we see that, then we see, as you might say, the light at the end of the tunnel. We say, okay, there is nirvana. I can see it. It's there at the end of the tunnel. Okay, and so you said, okay, now this is where I want to go. I want to be free from suffering good.
So đúng ấy học có được còn tăng quang người đúng ấy dùng đi xem mấy hiện đại đúng ấy nó sẽ ngồi đi ăn được cái đó đúng ấy nó sẽ ngồi thế thì cái học có cái thế thế mình hiểu cái mình đó sang được hết.
So do you feel that, you know what, and what a big deal about understanding suffering? I know understanding suffering. I have been through that a lot, I have cried over many issues in my life, it's painful. And I see other people crying over their problems. So I know what suffering is like. Do you feel like that?
Sometimes thing 아는지 나도 동의들 락바다 차신 차라니 그래서 저 락바다 가란지 고제니 기시했다 대가니 나사광게 수술 내가 매버다 준주도 하고 그러 왔어 루지 초회톤 하고 그러 왔어 이게는 동의 다 처음부터 가지고 하고 그러면서.
Now, when we talk about suffering, suffering exists at different levels, if you will. There are different types of suffering. Yes, there are many kinds of sufferings that we are exposed to, and we really know them quite well. Okay, if you get a migraine headache, you know it is painful. Okay, nobody has to give you a whole theory about suffering. It is just one heck of a pain. Or that if you are suffering from some kind of a sickness or disease, that is not something happy. Happening to you. We know that is a suffering, that is a pain. But a lot of the suffering that we understand as we think that, okay, I know about suffering, I've been through a lot in my life, I've seen other people go through their lives with suffering. They are related more with what we call the physical sensations and feelings. They are more at a very coarse level or a gross level suffering that we have access. We could easily access them if we understand. But the suffering also exists at a subtle level, and this is where we really don't understand, suffering in subtle forms.
No, sometimes that is 동의들은 뭐 소리는 저 희야때 때 동의들 가라서 통구요 알았어. 또 저한테 용 통구 긴거 알았어. 얘는 왜 동의 저번듯이 동의성이 이부때 알아서 그 시도요 말았어.
So in Buddhism, there is a whole theory on different types of suffering, or categories of suffering, you will. There is what we call, using a Buddhist terminology, it's called suffering of misery or suffering of suffering. Well, this is the level of suffering where we understand very well. We got a lot of experiences and we know what it is like. This basically means the kind of suffering that comes in a very manifest form, and it's easy to see, kind of right in your face, kind of suffering. We know that. But then there are other two types of suffering we don't know, and more subtle than the kind of usual kind of suffering is what we call suffering of change, and that we don't know. It is a suffering. And below that, if you will, if we can sort of put a level below that, what I mean to say is more subtle than that, or subtler than that, is what we call pervasive suffering. Now, this is really kind of a suffering that pervades lives in samsara. It's very subtle, and we don't know that. So what do we mean by suffering of change, or in Tibetan called gyurvedunges? This, relatively speaking, a subtle form of suffering. As a matter of fact, all things we consider pleasurable and happiness in our everyday ordinary life is in reality is a subtle form of suffering. For example, like we would love to, maybe if we are the kind of people who enjoy eating all kinds of food. We really derive a lot of pleasure, happiness out of eating food. Well, that seems like a kind of happiness, but if you really look at carefully, it is a subtle form of suffering. It changes its nature pretty soon. And the same thing with, like say, some of the other examples I gave is like if people like to booze, like drink, they think, okay, that's so cool, and it's just kind of relaxing. Well, maybe momentarily, but it is a form of suffering. The pleasure we derive from alcoholic drinks or even non-alcoholic drinks. It doesn't matter. Or people, who like to smoke or who want to go high, or whatever case maybe. This all looks like pleasures and happiness to us, but in reality, it is a form of suffering called suffering of change. And also like socializing, being at a party, and just hanging out with a friend, all these happy moments of life which we consider, in reality, these are in the nature of suffering.
So that joy dunges, naked deva imba kankila, that the ngod dunhik ngol and Geshe, Nina Sayuna, Takana, Mundipuritan, Natsaki, the Latini, that make you Unguaris, the Akoros.
Yes, these seems to be kind of pleasurable and happiness, and they are momentary, no doubt. But then pretty soon they change into, often they lead into suffering. Okay? And if you eat a lot of the food you really like, then it leads to problem. Okay, you might get sick. Okay? And so other things, they easily lead to suffering. So these, in other words, the point I'm trying to make here is the kind of pleasures and happiness we experience in life from all these different sources, as we can call them, is not real happiness. Because real happiness should not change, but these things change into suffering.
So that the Tandanga Joy Dungi Takasat. No, Devate Dungi, but some Tonguman to us. There's nothing about the Hego.
So I don't think we really usually consider these pleasures and happy moments of life as something a form of suffering, because we think these are these are not suffering in our understanding.
The juniors don't difference be locketons. The locketons
It is clearly stated in Buddhist literatures or Buddhist canons that the kind of perception we have, that regards which is a suffering as being the source of pleasure or pleasurable. So this is, as a matter of fact, is a wrong conception. It's a misconception. consider that which is in reality a subtle form of suffering, but we consider that as pleasurable or happiness.
somebody that kore ani chaban duji dongye se the covid nail shewa lang ni da le da nyam ke ani covid nail shewa lang ben zonte su phongbu de da chadi chni ani dongye de dinyan de shota lu de tma gin de ye de.
Now let's talk a little bit about pervasive suffering, or sometimes people translate as extensive suffering. Kyaba means it pervades, so this is the kind of suffering which is the subtlest form, if you will. Now what it really means is that as long as we, others, or anybody come to samsara or cyclic existence, determined by contaminated karmic actions and delusions, okay? So that means we are being influenced by. Somebody is deciding, or something is deciding, where we should be, or, in the samsara. Oftentimes, we come with aggregates, such as this body. So when we come to samsara, under the influence of contaminated karmic actions and delusions, it comes with this kind of a form of body. It automatically, we comes with suffering. And it is as if that, suffering walks with like a shadow. It follows us all the time because of the nature of life in samsara. So this pervasive suffering, which we call the subtlest form, that seems to be like the source of the other two types of suffering of change and suffering of misery. So now if we ask, so when can we see the end of pervasive suffering? If it's that nasty, that really kicks up the other two types of suffering, is right at the bottom, is very the root thing here. We could see the end of that kind of suffering, pervasive suffering, once we put an end to contaminated karmic actions and delusions, these states of mind. And this is the point where we become what is called, liberated, or the terms we use, arhat, okay, in Sanskrit. You have destroyed your enemy of delusions. That's what the meaning of four destroyer. Arhat in Pali, we call Trachamba in Tibetan. So once we reach that state of freedom, we become a transcendent, I shouldn't say transcendent, yes, sure, transcendental, but more than that, we are completely liberated from the state of suffering. So then, what really we need to do is we need to make efforts mainly to put an end to contaminated karmic actions and delusions. Okay, so what methods are available to us in order to put an end to stop contaminated karmic actions and delusions for good? Okay? Of course, there are many practices and methods in Buddhism laid out. The most important one, the primary antidote or method or practice you want to call it, is to realize selflessness. In other words, realization of emptiness, okay, or selflessness is the antidote to cut through contaminated karmic actions and delusions. Because we need to break this chain of the bond of contaminated karmic actions, delusions, and the best method or the antidote available to us is to realize emptiness or selflessness as it is. So in order to realize emptiness, of course, we got to meditate on emptiness, or we need to cultivate understanding of emptiness, or we need to cultivate insight into emptiness.
다 동반이 공비잖니 다 동반이 또야 그 타피로를 가서 땡중 어떤데 해고 저 탐지 땡는 중하다 체는 중 또는 중 어떤데 해고.
Okay, so in order to cultivate insight into emptiness or selflessness, or we call it meditating on emptiness or selflessness, of course there are many approaches we could follow. But perhaps the best approach to understand emptiness is to understand what is meant by dependent arising or dependently existent. In Sanskrit called pratit samutpat. Tenda. Everything is related. Everything exists dependently. Okay? And things are connected to each other. Nothing is really independent in and of itself. Okay? And so things exist dependently, not independently, okay? Not objectively. Things are not independent of each other. Things are interconnected. Things are related to each other. So it's important for us to understand that kind of, the dependent arising, or you might even call relativity, or whatever. See, that is the best approach to understand what emptiness is.
That is 최 간대지 이네야. 나니 간도 포나는 최 간대지 이네야. 아니 그 얘는 때네. 저당 제당 때바 다 주체면 면에 다 주체는 때면 그게 되는데 다가던데 이네야. 그 얘는 때네. 야바지 마도 그러랑은 좀 있잖아. 매치 차겠어.
So here we are really literally talking about everything that exists. Okay? Everything that exists dependently, not independently. So this is where we could use the term dharma, meaning all phenomena. By phenomena we mean something that really exists. Okay? So there are a lot of phenomena which exist dependently, in the sense that they are dependent upon their causes and conditions. That's how they come into being, and that's how they exist. Okay? So that's why things are produced by causes and conditions. They exist depending upon causes and conditions. Okay? Now every phenomenon is not like that. There are other kinds of phenomena which do not have causes and conditions per se. Okay? But those phenomena also exist dependently, in the sense that they, for their very existence, they need to rely upon something else other than themselves. Okay, other phenomena. So that's the kind of connection there is, dependency. So if we understand how everything does not exist in and of itself from its own side, okay, independently, but rather they depend on something else beside themselves to exist, or even to come into being. Okay, so then we are really starting to get a sense of what dependent arising means. Great Indian sage Arya Nagarjuna states in his one of the very fundamental works of Arya Nagarjuna is called the Fundamental Wisdom Treatise, Mulya Madhyamika, okay, and Sashe in Tibetan, and he states very clearly, as Geshe quoted the lines from memory. He said, if, this is a technical term, if produced phenomena do not exist, how can unproduced phenomena exist? Okay. Now, if I'm allowed to change this, because production, that might confuse you, is if impermanent phenomena don't exist, how could permanent phenomena exist? That's the same thing we're talking about. Okay. If there are, no such things as produced phenomena, then how could there be non-produced phenomena? Because production and non-production, they're asserted in relation to each other, right? That's the relativity. If there's something produced, then maybe there's something not produced. Okay.
배 매바짜니 매바지 매장 드네상 공점을 또 다음에 여대 얘기 말때 언제 멤버로 왔대 최든 저 요아랬지 또 요지 그 최에 때다 매적이 뭐도 비지는 거 나그야 말이지.
You know, when we meditate on emptiness, we should make sure that our mind is not kind of in a state of a blank state, thinking about nothing. So this is kind of empty, our mind is just like nothing is there. Well, that's not called meditating on emptiness. Or meditating on emptiness should not be like, we put ourselves in a blank state of mind. Now we conclude somehow that nothing after all exists in the world. Nothing really exists. Well, that again, you know, very absurd position to be in, because now we've gone crazy. What do you mean nothing exists at all? I mean, things exist. Come on. We exist, things exist. So if we put in a mind, nothing exists at all. After all, that's really true here, you know. That is the nihilist point of view. And that's not called, emptiness. So we don't need to go that far, right? You are meditating on emptiness, and then if you conclude, you also put in a state, kind of blank state, and conclude that nothing exists at all, that means you don't exist. Then who is meditating? You know? So it's really, not only very important, but essential, as a matter of fact, for us to understand, to realize what is emptiness? What does emptiness really mean? Rinpoche, who is also called Manjushri Lama Tsongkhapa, he composed a very profound and very touching praise in honor of our teacher Shakti Buddha. But that praise is labeled as praise of relativity or dependent arising, Tenzin Dorjee. So his main thesis here is, the way we praise Buddha, the highest praise or honor we could give to Buddha is that you are the kind of teacher who taught everything that has to do with dependent arising or relativity. You have said nothing, you see, that precludes or that has nothing to do with dependent arising or relativity. So, as we go through that whole praise, we will say that, so therefore I prostrate to you, or I bow down to you, who has most excellently, presented an expose on what dependent arising is, what relativity is. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, often before he teach, he pays his deep respect to Shakyamuni Buddha, who is also called Gautama, okay, the leader. And he did that at the Pasadena teachings, where we invited him to teach. And as Geshe quoted the stanza from his memory, so basically the verse or the stanza, it is stated that, Master, out of your infinite compassion, the one, you are completely free from all the misconceptions and wrong views and extremities. Okay, and you have truly realized the meaning of what is called ultimate reality. Okay, and then you teach that out of infinite compassion to us. So I bow down to you, the Gautama leader. Okay. So what I've just said is that if we truly realize emptiness as it is, we really have the deepest realization of emptiness, that can liberate us from the state of suffering, good, from samsara, and we will be in what we call state of freedom, nirvana or nibbana. Okay. But then the thing we need to remember is, yes, we ourselves are completely fine. We are in a happy state now, really. But then we haven't abandoned, all kinds of mental obscurations that are there to be abandoned. You see, we have still something left in our mind, defilement or obscuration that need to be abandoned, and we really haven't taken care of other, sentient beings. So from one's own kind of individualistic and personal point of view, once we truly realize emptiness as it is, and it leads us to the nirvana, we're completely okay, fine. Okay, we are in the state of happiness, everlasting. But the fact of the matter is that we have really not, thought much about all other sentient beings. And we still have got what is called the mental obscuration to omniscience. We are not completely enlightened yet. We are not a Buddha, say. Okay? So in order to get rid of this obscuration to omniscient knowledge, as we would say, what we really need to do is, we need to cultivate bodhicitta, the altruistic mind of enlightenment, or bodhisattva's attitude of mind, and we need to integrate that with the realization of emptiness. So this is where we need to bring together the realization of emptiness with the altruistic attitude. Now that combined practice, integrated practice, will lead us to complete enlightened state. So if bodhicitta or altruism is so crucial to reach complete enlightened state, now what are the ways to cultivate it? Of course, there are a number of practices or the methods to cultivate bodhicitta within our own mind. Because we cannot go into details at this point, we have to return to our wonderful text, which is related to bodhicitta, no doubt. But what I want to say is that if we are really truly interested in cultivating bodhicitta, these are some of the things we need to keep in our mind, that we really have to, keep a good heart, for everybody, literally meaning all sentient beings, not just the human beings. Okay? We, in whatever way we can help others, we need to do that. But there are many situations we cannot help others. At least we have to think positively and wish them happiness and benefits. Okay? At least our mind has to be in a positive state, even if we couldn't do anything literally to benefit sentient beings. We have to absolutely refrain from harming anybody, hurting anyone. Okay? So these are the essential parts of practices to cultivate bodhicitta. So here's one of the main theses today that you should remember, that even if you are very successful in uprooting delusions from within your mind, by realizing emptiness deeply, okay, and you reach the state of nirvana, you are called the arahats or the arahats or tattva. Oh, yes.
또 전주 생장일로 마신도 두 번이나 교토고야 말이야. 뭐좀 남아기는 사실 공부 도토 말이야.
So even if you are in the state of nirvana, but if you do not follow the way or the path of bodhisattvas or the Mahayana path, you will never be able to become Buddhas. Because in order to reach complete enlightened state, for anybody, for us, for anybody, we have to follow the way of bodhisattvas, path of Mahayana Buddhism.
알았어. 아니, 내가 다 tinsan데 나랑도 참말로 그 생기기 간데 진랑서 류당 아데 이지고 내가 짠 마시야 그 시 마시야 다 탑시셔 그랬어. 팬버드가 되기 시작했어.
So in our everyday life, we should see that we do not harm, hurt anyone through our actions of body, speech, and mind. In whatever way we could help them through our actions of body, speech, and mind, we should try to do that. At least, we make an attempt, efforts not to anyone, but if we could, try to help others.
다 가진 something huge. 다 따라 등하는 게 휴야때 땅남이 땅바르게 사바철을 뭐 럽된 땅 아니는 거 정말안서 뒤에 가서 올다 땅 치기스.
So all the things I said thus far this morning, as I often do, is to provide provide advices to the new students and to serve reminders for everybody who knew about these things, including myself, so that we really need to reflect on these key points. Do not forget how I started my teaching. I said that for each of us, we need to do two things. We need to take care of our life here and now. We need to take care of our future life as well. So each of us has got two jobs to do, not just one.
I think this. That's something about it.
Indeed, again,
Geshe Tembele ba. Lama kujisu. Kujisu tangi chen lam. Tangi chenbe lam tangi jute. Dordine nyansu lang bi tapji hyolas. Tandere. Geshe Tembele lama kujisu shi. Kasi chen sama.
The Tony the Ning Jing which is again.
Ore.
Shada the Tongbo you to them changes and send them out.
There eta. Ki kangina tongi ni jimbo chen se. Ta tela sheda de shenas. Ta chu shenas. Tongi ni bu ji se de ki nan chu dune songres. Ta kare na shred ba sheben tongba se de ni tanda shanju semres. Ane tanda shanju semres. Ta na tanda shanju ting kande ke res na chöti ja yi namse. Nilu yene sheme de ko te inse. Tendam sishi se de rangi shi de chöti ji ting tongba ni do go.
So we return to our wonderful text called a miscellaneous collection of Venerable Geshe advices. And so last week, we started off with Geshe Domtamba's advice to the three Kadampa brothers. They are spiritual brothers, not brothers by blood, as we talked about that. And so they asked Domtamba, could you kindly provide us a concise practice that incorporates the essential points to get to Buddhahood? Okay, and then Domtamba said, "Okay, here it is. You need to. There's only one thing to be cultivated," he said. There are many things to learn and maybe practice, but there's one phenomenon to be cultivated. That is, you need to integrate emptiness with compassion. Okay, so you need. So now he goes on to explain what emptiness means, what compassion means in this context. And here the Geshe the Temple continues to say that by emptiness, what I meant is you need to cultivate what is called ultimate bodhicitta. So then, what is that? Ultimate bodhicitta. Then he says, okay, what I mean by that is that you need to realize that in ultimate sense, no phenomenon is reduced from its own side. That is the ultimate nature or the reality of phenomena. Okay. Another thing that is, you need to realize emptiness of every phenomenon. Okay. That nothing exists in and of itself, and that is the true nature, if you will, the final nature of a phenomenon.
第收电的说到没给他缺汤皮生在那里的，他现在有这个长毛了，的个个就在他这个等的是，让一这的那路因为他打几块的，打几块的，因为他这么着是让一他那路是，这开始的让一就看到几个呢，个让一这那路呢，因为这张原嘛的，对，让一这张没不的，这那个
So here, again, we're talking about all phenomena, literally mean all. So that means that both animate and inanimate phenomena or objects. Just not simply talking about living organisms. We're also talking about non-living things or phenomena that exist. What we really need to understand is nothing, and meaning phenomenon, exists from its own nature, okay, from its own side. Okay, that's what emptiness is. Things don't exist, from their side, objectively or in and of itself.
但是你是当然来讲嘛，呢，他刚才讲，他刚才可能定为什呢？让性的，让呢让一直不讲没事让越对要的话是，因为让一直不让的，但没事。아니 랑데 니루도 여르도 니루 중 뭐니 좀 있잖아 메디아서.
I mean, we can of course work with a particular phenomenon as our subject, object, whatever you want to call it. Again, you're happy to call it. Because once we understand emptiness of a phenomenon, then emptiness is same with all other phenomena. Okay, and so we may be able to take ourselves or self as an example, as our focus. And we all know that self exists or I exist. Okay? But the way I exist is not from my own side. Okay? Not objectively. Not from the side of the self itself. But I exist, in a different sense, dependently. Okay? So once we focus on a particular phenomenon and try to understand what's the ultimate nature of that phenomenon? Okay, it doesn't exist from its own side. It has a nature. It has a reality, but it does not exist. That reality or the nature does not exist from its own side. So I believe that we know this already. Just to kind of highlight it again, is many of you probably recite the Heart Sutras. Okay, Hridayam Sutra it's called, and we come across things like no ear, no nose, no this, no that, no that. Okay, well we all know there are such things as eyes or nose or ears, and they do exist. But what the Heart Sutra really meant is there are no inherently existent eyes, inherently existent ears, inherently existent nose. In other words, there are no such things as eyes existing objectively from their own side. There is no such thing as nose that exists objectively from its own side. But there is a nose, there are eyes. Okay? So often, of course, we have to understand in the context of a particular school of thought, but the position we are taking here is that, the terms we use, emptiness of inherent existence, emptiness of true existence, emptiness of objective existence, these are all synonyms. They all mean just the same thing, okay, in this particular position we are taking. So that means things do not exist truly from their own side. Things do not exist inherently from their own side. Things don't exist in and of themselves. That's the meaning of emptiness. Once you realize that, then you have got what is called ultimate bodhicitta.
这些。当然呢，但经济呢是经济呢，工作上就sem的是，但工作上就是呢，经济因为没当不是，因为经济的工作上就是不考虑。
So remember, he started saying that we need to integrate emptiness with compassion, but the compassion in this context, it really actually refers to conventional mind of enlightenment or conventional bodhicitta. Of course, we know that compassion and bodhicitta is not one and the same thing. But in this context, the term compassion is used to refer to conventional bodhicitta.
当然呢，经济的呢，上去是生命的呀，经济呢工作上去生是的，是中国也搞的是呢，那经济全部的，你全部的，经济个哪里你全部的嘞，你全部的那上去是生是的，就是让你的社会业主去，业为去下个是。
So of course, again, here is a particular kind of compassion. It's the great passion, not any other kind of compassion. So why, you use the great compassion to refer to conventional bodhicitta, if you wonder? Well, it's because of the close proximity between the two states of mind. Because great compassion is what we call the direct cause of conventional bodhicitta. Or in other words, to use a technical term here, great compassion is the substantial cause of conventional bodhicitta. So they are very close proximity. Because of that, great compassion is used to refer to conventional bodhicitta in this context. As it is stated in ornament of Mahayana Sutras called Mahayana Sutra Alankara, it says, as Geshe quoted the line, the root cause of that, meaning conventional bodhicitta, is compassion. Okay, so great compassion is the primary cause, the root cause of conventional bodhicitta. So the great compassion is the primary cause of conventional bodhicitta, but in order to cultivate great compassion, we need to develop affection towards all sentient beings. All meaning literally all, like including who we usually call enemies. Okay? I mean, we might categorize beings into friends and strangers and enemies, but from the development of great compassion or bodhicitta point of view, there are no such things as enemies and friends and strangers. Everybody is a friend. Okay? So we need to develop that sense of affection, towards sentient beings in order to be able to cultivate great compassion. Mahakaruna. So when we think about sentient beings, we really have affection for sentient beings, we care about them, in other words, and come to see that sentient beings have not realized either ultimate bodhicitta or conventional bodhicitta, then that really gives us a sense to feel great compassion for towards them and to cultivate the ultimate the conventional bodhicitta.
That this under no that Sinji to call it Korean nail round the round and dog. Sinji Chaman does Sinji to Korean nail. Korean nail doing your way at the leather your mojo shavers. Leather your more one coin in the gun. Listen, Nilu could end the motto with one gay and then call a cooperation. He should.
So this is how we could cultivate great compassion. We reflect on the problematic situation we and all others find ourselves in. That is called samsara, cyclic existence. Okay? And it doesn't matter where we are in samsara, taken for granted, the way we came into here is decided by our contaminated karmic actions and delusions. We didn't decide it, they decided it. So it could be anywhere under that decision in samsara, we experience one or the other form of problems and suffering. So that's the fact of life, okay, ours and others. And so what really truly brings us suffering are the contaminated karmic actions and delusions, the true real causes of suffering. In order to break this bondage or uproot these causes of suffering, we need to realize emptiness as it is, or the ultimate nature of phenomena. Okay? And when we see that, neither ourselves nor others have realized this wonderful phenomena that can liberate us, then we could develop a sense of compassion to other sentient beings.
최단계 랑이 최단계 에는 가르쳐야 그치 인자 랑이 임박 대단한 맛이 있어 최단계 랑이 좀 아주 되네 시험에 되네 맞을까 얘는 야때 마도가 생기도 전에 마도가 생기도 전에 퀄리티가 그래서 저 생기더니 대화다 디비전 대화다 디비전 댐브르샤 동네 주다 자워샤 아 노신에 세메기가 노신 때도 다는 노스 가능도 왔어.
Of course, there are many different ways to approach this and to do our practice. In certain wonderful prayers, for example, it starts off saying that all phenomena, in the ultimate sense, do not exist from their own side. That is the ultimate nature of phenomena. But we and sentient beings have not yet realized the true nature of the phenomena, and because of that, we are going round and round and round in samsara. Okay, so going round and round in samsara, we bump from one suffering to the other suffering, and so this is what we experience. And so then, reflecting on the predicament of our life, if you will, that we started to develop a sense of, we wish how nice it would be if sentient beings are free from suffering and its causes. Right? May I be able to do so. Okay, may they themselves be able to do so. Okay, how nice it would be if sentient beings are free from suffering, have the real happiness. May I be able to do that. May they be able to do that for themselves. So this is how we cultivate what is known as the four immeasurables. Immeasurable love, immeasurable compassion, immeasurable sense of joy, immeasurable sense of equanimity. See, we can approach the practice from many different angles, if you will, see, but relating to the fact that none of us has yet got the realization of emptiness as it is.
Tenas datang hamatul dan sungde junse tenas tiba kembe lam nyam selemba nam chise tiba kembe lam nyam selangi kandi chen sungo nam chise tambo shanju ji sengi bote juela mashe ba shewe shewe talam begurista kodo shanju tenda ju mashe ba ranjuela mashe ba sta shewe ma chonzo shewe tala begurista tiba kembe lam nyani sing but nista kan chingkandi jingina tambo karsha tambo oni shamji senyi bote ranji mashe pate shevi talam begorkan. Because
of that, meaning all the rational given already, why we need to cultivate, the two types of bodhicitta. So then here, Kadampa goes on to advise us that, practitioners of Mahayana Buddhism, or Bodhisattva way of life, must first make efforts to cultivate the two types of bodhicitta, ultimate bodhicitta and the conventional bodhicitta, that they have not yet cultivated in their mind, which means most of us, right? Or maybe all of us here. Okay?
That tambutishe. That parduse. Pardu kanchurusana. Pardu yangs. Shanju say number ni. Jula sheba tingila jankes. Jankes kanda. So first, we need to generate these two minds of enlightenment within ourselves that we have not yet generated. But second, once we have generated these minds of enlightenment within ourselves, we need to sustain them. We need to further the development of these two minds of enlightenment. That's
what we need to do in the middle.
Tati Zhangbayina, Shanji Servati Nabanila Rango, Zhangbayina, Takari Tare and Debu Chego Tang and Zuku Tang Monsun Top never is that.
So first we generate the trance of enlightenment in our mind that we have not yet generated. Second, we try to sustain and further the developments of the 2 months of enlightenment. But do that, so finally, what we really realize or achieve is we achieve the true enlightened bodies, or the 2 kayas. Attain Dharma kaya, or the truth body, and we attain Rupa kaya, or the form body, enlightened body. So those would be the definite results that we will accomplish, realize at the end of our practice. You will.
Ani tikwa chimbi lam nyam su lengi ta ani drebu sanji kompa thom de ke zo ke ta khari che go thong ta par su ke ani le shao sum de was.
So practitioners of Mahayana path, or those who are interested in this, have 3 things to do. Right? What do we need to? Where do we need to start? And what do we need to do in the middle? And where do we end up at the end?
Ta mo de dang ba ta ani shanji sen ko shanji ta shanji sen mo sem ni bote arrange ma ba che talam be gores so.
So the first thing first, we need to make efforts to cultivate ultimate bodhicitta and conventional bodhicitta in our mind, because we don't have them yet.
Ani rangi ma she be talam be ne she sona rangi she sona kare chona ta ka le chamba tharsim ba she ne jang gores kana so.
So we need to engage in the necessary practices to generate those 2 months of enlightenment first in our mind. So once we have generated them, then we still need to further them, or in other words, we need to familiarize ourselves more and more with these 2 months of enlightenment. We have to continuously, or continually, develop the intimacy, more and more intimacy with these 2 months of enlightenment.
Tati jangdi chani ta khande je go sona tiba chi be lam nga ta sa tu jin be de ni ta di ring kal jang res.
So if you're wondering, okay, how long should I keep on familiarizing or furthering this mind of enlightenment, this is where in the Buddhist literature we talk about the 5 paths, and within the 5 paths we talk about the 10 spiritual grounds of Bodhisattvas. This is what is happening on the paths and the grounds, that we are generating more and more intimacy with the minds of enlightenment. We are furthering them, little by little along the path and the grounds.
Ta tiwa chembe sa kyo tang lam nga ata ni jangba thar shin su na ta ti ji da rebu ko ni bu tan da ani chego de zoku ni bu tin do re ta re.
So once we progress on the 5 paths of Mahayana Buddhism, and within which include the 10 spiritual grounds called Dashabhumi or Bodhisattvas, so once we have traveled along this journey completely, or we have graduated from these paths and grounds, if you will, then where we find ourselves, our destination is we have the true enlightened bodies, truth body, Dharmakaya, and form body, Rupakaya.
To sanje je ko ni do sa rang rangi le sha bang na rang de yo zo yen de yo zo ta rangi de yo zo ba res.
So once we have actualized these enlightened bodies, or another way of saying is once we have become complete enlightened beings, then we have fulfilled what we call the complete purposes of our life, as well as we are in a complete position to fulfill the purpose of others' lives.
Rang de yo zo kar de na rang de pang goya ke dvani bo de nyonde ta chide ni bo tam seba mal ba chawa de pang ni ta chan chan de ya ma skang de pang charas so de rang de yo zo bres. So
we have completely fulfilled our purposes of life once we are in the complete enlightened state, once we are Buddhas. Okay, why? Because we have abandoned everything that is there to be abandoned, negativities and defilements. To be simple, we have completely got rid of delusions and obscuration to omniscient knowledge. Nothing left to be abandoned. There's nothing more to be realized. Everything is perfect, in this state. So our life is completely fulfilled to the greatest extent possible. So in other words, that we have abandoned everything that is need to be abandoned, in terms of negativities and defilements, have actualized everything that is there to be realized from spiritual point of view. All the paths, all the grounds, all the realizations, all the qualities, nothing is there to be actualized. And as we also said that we also in an enlightened state have the complete abilities to bring about the fulfillment of others' life, which is to say that now as an enlightened being within a split of a second, we can simultaneously benefit billions of sentient beings. That's the kind of ability, we gain as an enlightened being. So this is also, out of like a spontaneity. It's not like, the thing we have to do, first we have to think, then we have to make effort, and then, it's juggling thing. There's no juggling here. It's just all spontaneously flowing, you see, every split of a second that you could benefit innumerable sentient beings.
What is the juggling? So that when you're doing also children sing it tongue then that there just Sanji Kumbato and Kusukama Kui go shower mango tame Kuik Marita Kuiki and shower mango to put to say come my ticket none any see don't do the others. The nigga Sanji Kumbaton, the nigga child. So
once we reach complete enlightened state, that is where we ourselves are enlightened beings called Buddhas, right? So we have reached the highest goal that we could, think of in spiritually. So the kind of abilities we gain is that even within a split of a second, we can emanate millions of emanations sent it to benefit sentient beings. Literally, it just automatically and spontaneously it just works within a split of a second. Now imagine that if we can benefit billions of sentient beings within 5 minutes, and how wonderful is that?
Same time.
All at the same time. So we have prayer requests for a number of people here, and all of them have left us already. Anita Prapi, Merle Foster, Ray Mistrick, Emily Nalus, Nguyen Dang Kwai, Grandmother Norso, and so prayers have been requested for them.
That the nigga that she came on which shown the wash, and you could not have a that the look around to the Rawashini, Kim Helm Jag, Rawashi, Sonsa, and around to the crown so any shingle and the long shini, some to any Dindy Kenza Tomney, Sanji Chut and Jenny, any Corsican. Mr. Tending Santonglish.
So we have several names here on the list who are no more with us, but we also know that there are many more people who are no more with us, and we need to think about all of them. There are people who are struggling with their life. They are bedridden sicknesses and terminal illnesses and so forth. So we want to think about everybody who are in a difficult situation. And the thing is that when we get names, and they are making requests to us that we can generate some prayers for them, help them. So let's sincerely pray for them and hope that our prayer will activate good karmas that they themselves created, so that they are able to find good rebirths through their good karma, that through our conditioning, their ripening of the karma, and may they be able to meet with authentic spirituality, and through their efforts be able to grow spiritually towards better existence.
Shitang Malam Jetta, Hindi Mambu, around Samalu, remotely here to Power Sherry, Power Sherry, Power Sherry, so what in Mani Diet, Kanga Kians and
Of course, there are hundreds of different prayers we could recite and say in this kind of situation, but then we always try to recite Arya Avalokiteshvara, Buddha of Compassion's name mantra, because then everybody knows, we all know that. That's one thing we are sure that we all know. And so together we visualize Buddha Avalokiteshvara or Buddha Konyan in some other language, and then recite Om Mani Padme Hum. Let us dedicate our collective merit for flourishing of Dharma, the source of benefits and happiness throughout the universe. May His Holiness the Dalai Lama and all other great holy masters, wherever they are in any part of the universe, live long, be successful in fulfilling their visions, benefiting sentient beings. May spiritual communities throughout the world and spiritual practitioners from all nations remain healthy, harmonious, and may never face any obstacles in their soul paths and development, be able to have all the favorable conditions for spiritual growth, and be successful in fulfilling their spiritual aims and objectives. May this and other world environments be free of all kinds of unwanted pains and problems, and may beings find peace, happiness, prosperity, and spirituality. In short, we dedicate our collective positive energy for all kind mother sentient beings to be free from the fears and dangers, two types of mental obscuration, and may we all reach complete enlightened state quickly.
光年功德被我修，东尼道人不知，马杰巴南谁手结，谢巴年巴没巴当，光年功德被我修，刚日热面国为真光芒的，平当的我梦里中为你，谢日生我的家所以，特别是你帮助天主。所以别是也没多真，这个那个你的全部问题，上街见到没全部一，如果能到经了是不说一等不如人，这老个你要的有。